Today's Daf Bezos Hashem is Daf Yomi Yevamos Daf Yud Aleph. We will begin, we're a little bit behind, from Daf Yud Amid Beis, about 4 lines from the top. Amalater Shakas Rabbi Yochanan. We learned previously that there was this person, Levi, who wanted to add a number 16 to the Mishnah. Number 16th case, even though the Mishnah only lists out 15, he wanted to add this number 16th case. It's called Imoi Anusas Aviv. Your mother, who is your mother, who is not the wife of your father, but somebody who your father had an affair with. So what does it mean? It means, let's say you have this case. Levi was married to Miriam, and then he had a son Shimon. So this is his normal son. But then Levi was Ma'anis, who had an affair with Shifra, and had a son Menashe. Now, according to Rabbi Yehuda, according to the Rabbanim, not Rabbi Yehuda, according to Rabbanim, Shimon is permitted to marry Shifra. And even according to Rabbi Yehuda, if Shimon married Shifra, the Kedushin's okay. If he did an Avera, because you're not allowed to marry, according to Rabbi Yehuda, Nusas Aviv, the person that your father had an affair with. But if he did it, the Kedushin works. So Shimon married Shifra, and he has another wife, Leah, and Shimon died. So then Shifra, which is the mother of Menashe, because when Levi had an affair with Shifra, they had a son Menashe. Shifra falls to Yibam and Leah falls to Yibam. So since Menashe cannot do Yibam with his mother, he doesn't do Yibam with the Tzara, which is Leah. So what do you see from here? There's another case called Ima Anusas Aviv, but this came as a result of Shimon doing something wrong. If he did something wrong, you have case number 16. So the Gemara over here says that if you're starting to include cases where one of the brother did something wrong in his marriage, and that's how you're manufacturing another erva that should be written in the Mishnah, let's do this case. Listen and let us say this case. The migoid iasura, tzrasa name asira. So let's get this case. The case is like this. The case is like this. This case. You have Ruvain and Shimon. Ruvain died, okay? And Ruvain was married to Rachel. Shimon was married to Miriam, okay? Ruvain died, and Shimon did chalitza on Rachel. And then, after doing chalitza on Rachel, okay, let's take it again from the top. This is the case that you should be adding. The case is like this. You have step 1, you have Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda are brothers. Step 2, Reuven marries, takes Rachel for a wife. Step 3, Reuven dies without children, and his wife falls to his brother for Yibam, or chalitza. What does Shimon do? She does a chalitza to Rachel, and then, so Rachel could technically marry somebody else, but then Shimon goes ahead and does marries her. And Kedushin works because technically you're not supposed to do that, but b'di'evid, if you did it, the marriage does work. Because once you give somebody chalitza, you can't marry her again. But yet Shimon did it again, and he married Rachel. And Shimon has another wife called Miriam. Now when Shimon dies, and he dies without Shimon, Levi and Yehuda are also to Rachel and Miriam. Why? Because this Rachel, according to Rabbi Yochanan, according to Rish Lakish, will always remain asur on the rest of the brothers. You see, to this brother, he could potentially remarry her after giving chalitza, because since he was involved with her, there's no Isser Eishes Ach on this girl, Rachel. So if he gave her chalitza, if he tries to marry her, it's Isser Lav. But to the other brothers who didn't do anything with her, chalitza or yibam, nothing, so she always remains the Isser Eishes Ach. So when subsequently Shimon dies, it's basically an Eishes Ach falling to yibam. So therefore, since they can't do yibam on Rachel, they don't do yibam on Miriam. So the Gemara is going to, oh, that's the case. Now you should be aware that in this case, it's not simple because there's an opinion called Rabbi Yochanan who will hold that Rachel is permitted to marry Levi and Yehuda. It's an Isser Lav, but Rachel is permitted to Levi and Yehuda. And technically, with the letter of the law, since she's not an Isser Kares, Levi and Yehuda would be required to give her Yibam and Chalitza or Yibam after Shimon dies. Because once she was involved with a Chalitza, with Shimon, she always remains in Isser Lav. In other words, as soon as Reuven dies, the Isha Eshes Ach falls off, and technically Levi and Yehuda could marry Rachel and Miriam if they fall to Yibam through Shimon. That said, that's Rabbi Yochanan's opinion. According to Resh Lakish's opinion, she remains with an Isser Kares. So let's read this Gemara inside. The Gemara says, so according to that, let us say the case, let's add it, case number 17. Someone gives chalitza, one brother gives chalitza to the Yevama, the chaz of a kitcha, and did an avera, but was mekadesh her again, and the kedushin works. When he dies without children, so we could say it's an Isser Kares. The migay the ihi asira, since you can't do, she remains asar to the other brothers because of Eshes Ach. So rasa nami asura. The co-wife is also asar for that same reason, because she, according to the other brothers, she always remained in Eshes Ach, and therefore the co-wife is asar. So here you have case number 17. So Rabbi Yochanan answered. Rabbi Yochanan answered a simple case, because since this Rachel is also to all the brothers, there's never a chance that she's going to marry another brother, and that she's going to answer the co-wife marrying another brother, and that co-wife is going to answer another co-wife. You see, in all the cases of our Mishnah, you could extend it that true Levi and Yehuda can't marry Rachel or Miriam. But in all the cases in the Mishnah, technically one brother could marry Miriam, and you can have a case of tsaras tsarasa, where it would be asr if she dies, so that, and it comes back to the original brother that had an issa to her, that was an arayas to her, he can't marry her because she was a tsara of a tsara, a co-wife of a co-wife. But that only works if in all the cases in the Mishnah, and in one sentence, all the cases of the Mishnah have the arayas could marry one of the brothers. She's not an erva to all the brothers. She can marry another brother. But in this case, this Rachel over here is an issa to all the brothers, all the remaining brothers. So it's very different than the cases in the Mishnah, and therefore that's why it's not mentioned in the Mishnah. So the Gemara is now going to discuss, why did Rabbi Yochanan answer Rish Lakish this way? Rabbi Yochanan could hold that this is not a case of an arayas, because according to Rabbi Yochanan, Rachel is permitted to marry Levi and Yehuda. Because according to Rabbi Yochanan, once her original husband Reuven died, there's no more Isha Eshes Ach. And therefore, she's always a lav to these brothers. So technically, it's not an erva to them. So that's the Gemara's question at this moment. The Gemara says, the Gemara asks, "V'lei melei, why didn't Rabbi Yochanan say chayav lavin he, v'chayav lavin b'nei chalitza v'yibinhu? This Rachel is not an Isser Kares to the other brothers, and therefore she would go scot free and pata the tzara. It's an Isser Lav, and she would need chalitza or yibam by the other brothers." So the Gemara says the dvar of kamelei. Rabbi Yochanan answered vis-a-vis the opinion of Rish Lakish. He said, "Lididi, to me, this is not case number 17. Chayav lavim, they are called chayav lavim, but chayav lavim b'nei chalitza v'yibanim, and chayav lavim, you could do chalitza and yibam, and technically, this Rachel in the pictures that we're showing could marry the other brothers. Didach, according to you, chayav krisis ninu l'fisha einem b'tzaras tzarasa. You're telling me that they're chayav krisis, and so it should be mentioned in the Mishnah. I'll give you a reason why it's not mentioned in Mishnah, because this Rachel, according to your reasoning, is asur on all the brothers, and so it doesn't fit in with the pattern of the Mishnah. With the erva is only asur on one brother and not another brother, so you can have the extension of tzaras sarasa continue. The Gemara discusses, and this is if I would write the Gemara, I'll put this itmar first, and then you would understand the previous Gemara a lot clearer. But itmar, let us see. This was the teaching. This is the case. One brother, let's say Reuven died. Shimon, again, did chalitza to the Yevama, because of a kitcha, and then he was Mekadosh. Amar Resh Lakish says, "Who eina chayav al chalitza kares." He's not a problem. He's not chayav on the chalitza kares, because if he remarried her, no problem. The kedushin is working, is typhus. But the brothers chayav al chalitza kares. If this Shimon would die, and they want to live with Rachel, this is the case, then if Shimon dies, they always still remained with the Eishes Ach. It's only Shimon that the Eishes Ach was released because he did Chalitza with her. But to Levi and Yehuda, she always remained the Isra Eishes Ach. So if Shimon dies and they have relations with her, it's Karis, because it's Eishes Ach. Rabbi Yochanan, no. Once she became into the Yavama situation, the whole Isha Eishes Ach falls off from all the brothers. No chalitz, they don't get, they're not chayev kares, not on the chalutza herself and not on the co-wife. So the Gemara says, my time with the Rish Lakish. What's the reason, Rish Lakish, that the Isha Eishes Ach only falls off to the brother that did chalitza? Amakra, because the pasuk says, Asher Yivna. If you don't build a house, if you give chalitza, that's called not building the house of the brother that died. So Kevin Shalebana, we say, since Shimon didn't build the house, Shuv Lo Yivna, he can't remarry her again. So what the Torah is in essence saying, that if he wanted to remarry her, it's not an Issa Kares, but it would be an Issa Lav called, you didn't build it, so you don't get a second chance. But it's not an Issa Kares. So Ihu, the first guy, the Shimon, who did the Chalitza and got involved with this lady, who the Koy B'Layivna, he always remains with Layivna. There's no Isha Eishes Ach for this brother. And therefore, if B'di'evet, he did do it, if he did get married to her, we have a klal, Kedushin Toifsim, Kedushin take effect, even with a Chayv Lav. Aval Echav, but the brothers, Kidakaim and Kaimim, the brothers still remain with the Isha Eishes Ach, and therefore, Va'Allah, he the Koy B'Layivna, Atzara the Kaima Kaima. So what they say is that on her, she remains, and sorry, this Rish Lakish is continue. The brothers still remain with the Issa Eishes Ach, and therefore it's Karis. Ba'Allah Dida, who the Kaibala Yivna. And even Rish Lakish limits his opinion. He says, on the first lady, there's the one that you did Chalitza, only that lady is Isser Lav if you remarry her. Tzara, but the original Tzara, Kaima, always remained with an Isser Karis. So suppose Ruvain over here had another wife, right? So according to Rish Lakish, since he only did Chalitza with Rachel, only Rachel, if he wants to remarry her, is with an Isser Lav. But Shimon, if he wanted to take this woman, the Tzara of Ruvain, the Tzara of Rachel, the first co-wife of Rachel, that would still remain in Isser Kares. But Rabbi Yochanan Rama, no, once Ruvain died, all Isha Eishes Ach is suspended. When his wives fall to Yibim, there's no Isha Eishes Ach, and it never comes back again. So that's what we say. Mi'ika de mi'ikare iboya haicholitz v'boya haicholitz v'boya lahaicholitz v'boya lahaicholitz v'hashta koya le b'yiksa kares. You see, originally when Ruvain died, anybody could have taken the Rachel or her co-wife. So as soon as when Ruvain died, all his wives there was no Isha Eishes Ach on any one of his wives. So therefore, where does it come back? Once it goes away, it should never come back. Ela ihu shlichusa de akam ka'avid. When Shimon did Chalitza, he's representing all the other brothers. And therefore, it's almost as if the other brothers did Chalitza with this lady. And therefore, and because of that, they all have the Isser Lav if they want to remarry her. And same thing with the wife herself. Shlichasa de tzara ka'avid. She's doing the shlichus of not only herself, but the shlichus of her tzara and of her co-wife. And therefore, Rachel who takes a chalitza is not just taking a chalitza for herself, she's taking a chalitza on behalf of her co-wife. And therefore, both Rachel and her co-wife, let's put the co-wife over here, the co-wife always remained, according to Rabbi Yochanan, an Isser Lav. There's never, once Reuven died, boom, Issacharus goes away, and then if Shimon does chalitza, if he wants to take her back, he would be getting a lav of shuvla yivna, but he wouldn't get kares. But according to Shlakish, you get kares for something like that. Now the Gemara is going to discuss. Rabbi Yochanan has a clear brisa that sides with him. The brisa says, someone does chalitza to his yivama. If you do chalitza to your Yavama, and then you gave her Kedushin again and died, you need Chalitza for Na'achem. You need Chalitza. In this scenario, this beautiful scenario, this scenario again, if Shimon dies, according to the Brisa, Levi and Yehuda are required to give Chalitza. There would be an Isser Lav for them to marry, but that an Isser Lav doesn't pater, exempt somebody from Chalitza. Therefore, when Shimon dies, the Brisa says either Levi Yehuda should do chalitza on Rachel, right? And Bishlam Chayve Lavin. So Rabbi Yochanan explains his question. I say this is a Chayve Lavin, and therefore you need chalitza from the brothers. You can't do yibum because at the end of the day, since you have the Isser Lav of Shuv Lo Yivna, since she once got a chalitza. Okay, so you can't marry her, but still she's not an Issacharus because the Isha Eshesach flew away from this lady, and therefore you at least at the very least, Levi and Yehuda and Levi have to give Chalitza. According to you, Rish Lakish, since she remains an Isha Eshesach to the other brothers, Amai Tzricha Chalitza, why would she need Chalitza? So the Gemara asks back, Rish Lakish asks back, you tell me this brisa makes sense and it's a question against me? According to your reasoning, Ema Seifa. Let's take a look at the end of the brisa. One of the brothers get up and does do Kedushin. Ein lo olav klim, the Kedushin doesn't work. Wait a second, you just told me that if one of the brothers, and I really should make this the large picture today. You just told me that if one of the brothers does do chalitza over here, if one of the brothers does kedushin to Rachel, it works. That's what the brisa says. The brisa says that if one of the brothers does kedushin to Rachel, it doesn't work. It doesn't take effect. But according to Rabbi Yochanan, it should work because there's only an Isser Lav if Levi would take kedushin to Rachel. So let's read that inside. According to Ultamech, Amos Sefer, look at the end of this brisa. The end of the brisa seems to agree with me. If one of the brothers does do kedushin, and according to you, it's a chayve lav, ein lo olav klim. It doesn't work. And if you're trying to tell me it's a chayve lav, amai ein lo olav klim. Why shouldn't it work? Of course it should work. It's only chayve lav, not a chayve kroris. Rav Sheshes, Seifen asen Rabbi Kiva the Oma, ein kedushin toifsim b'chayve lavin. So according to Rabbi Yochanan, you'll answer the brisa that the end of the brisa goes according to this unique sheet of Rabbi Kiva, who holds that even somebody who is asur b'chayve lavin, kedushin doesn't take effect. Okay, so now that simplifies the matter that when the Sefer says that if one of the brothers tries to do kedushin, it doesn't work because although it's a chayve lavin, Rabbi Kiva holds that kedushin doesn't work chayve lavin. And the beginning of the brisa goes according to Rabbanan. So and that's why if the beginning of the brisa goes according to Rabbanan and the end of the brisa goes according to Rabbi Kiva, here you have a problem. Why doesn't the brisa say explicitly in the end that according to Rabbi Kiva, a kedushin for the second from any other brothers would not work? Why doesn't it mention the word u'ledivrei Rabbi Akiva? Since you're switching opinions in the brisa itself, the beginning of the brisa goes according to Rabbanan, and the end of the brisa goes according to Rabbi Akiva. So that's a very difficult way to learn brisa. The Gemara answers kasha. We go to Daf Yomi Yevamos Daf. That's a good question. Ravashi has another teretz to this question. He says he holds like Resh Lakish. He holds like Resh Lakish that the woman remains chayve krisis to the other brothers. And he could explain the Brisa away very simply according to Rabbi Shimon. And Ravina, Sovelak Rabbi Yechon. Ravina holds like Rabbi Yechon, Mataritz Rabbanan, and he learns like the Rabbanan. Let's just review that this famous machlokes between Rabbanan and Rabbi Shimon. Rabbanan hold that every Eishes Ach that's born later on, every brother that was born after one of the brothers died, the brother that died and left over his wife. And then you have a brother born. So always that brother that's born can never do Yibam Chalitza. That woman is considered to remain an Isher Eishes Ach. That's Rabbanan has a very strict shita. Anytime a person dies and then he has another brother born, that brother that was born remains Isher Eishes Ach. Rabbi Shimon holds there is a leniency. He holds that when do you say that? When do you say that the person remains Eishes Ach to the lady is only if that lady never did Yibam with another brother. But let's say one brother died. Then the lady that fell to Yibam did Yibam with another brother, a live brother. And then this boy was born. So when he was born already, his deceased brother's wife was already married to another brother. When that brother dies, he is permitted to marry that woman. Although at one point she was married to another brother that was his brother, and he would be considered Eishes Ach Shloyo B'Olamai, but that's not considered Eishes Ach Shloyo B'Olamai. Eishes Ach Shloyo B'Olamai is only when she was in limbo, not married to any of the other brothers. But if she was married to any of the other brothers, then she's according to Reb Shimon, you have that leniency. And leniency, it's not considered Eishes Ach Shloyo B'Olamai. So let's read the Brisa. Let's explain the Brisa, and everything will make perfect sense. Rav Ashi Savalak Rav Shlokish. Rav Ashi holds like Rav Shlokish. Taretz like Rabbi Shimon, and says the Brisa goes according to Rabbi Shimon. How do you read the Brisa? Someone does chalitza to zivama. The chaz of the kitchen took her back. Tzricha chalitza min ha'achem. She needs chalitza from the brothers, right? And why? Why would she fall to Yibam? L'chayra, she's an Eishes, she's a person with kares to her. Yes, but if there was another brother that was born while she was married to Shimon, if another brother became born while she was married to Shimon, the second brother, so that brother potentially could, she doesn't have the Eishes Ach from Ruvain, and therefore potentially she could marry this person when Shimon dies. So therefore, that's why she needs chalitza from this brother that was born after she was married to the second brother. Man achen hayeludim. The achem that was born, kamam kereb Shimon. This goes according to Reb Shimon. And when the Brisa says, Oman echem and anayilodim v'kitsha, if one of the brothers that were already born, there was already around like in our case, and you can see it over here. In our case, let's call X the brother that's born. In our case, Levi and Yehuda, if Levi and Yehuda try to do kedushin with her, according to the Brisa, kedushin wouldn't work because there's an Issachar on Rachel. But when does the Brisa say that you need chalitza? Is for this brother that was born later on. This brother that was born later on, after Shimon did chalitza, re-yibmed Rachel. So now, when this brother is born, when Shimon dies, this brother technically would be able to do yibum to Rachel because he has no relations to Reuven. Reuven was a dead brother to him and no relation to him. So therefore, if this dead brother would need to do chalitza or yibum, and that's what the Brisa is talking about. Ravina savalak Rabbi Yechon. Ravina holds like Rabbi Yechon. He says that you could explain the Brisa according to the Rabbanim. The Brisa says you need chalitza from the achem. Man achem hanoladim kaman Rabbi Yechon. So the first part of the Brisa makes perfect sense according to Rabbi Yechon. Reuven died, left over Rachel. Shimon did a chalitza and then a yibum on Rachel. When Shimon dies, Levi and Yehuda are required to do chalitza on Rachel because she's only asa to them because of an Isalav. But for this brother that was born later on, is an Eishes Ach Shelo B'Lamai. And according to Rabbanan, in the strict sense of the word, he always remains the Isra Eishes Ach of Reuven. It never went off to him because he was never born when Reuven was around. And that's what the Brisa means in the end. So the Gemara says like this: that doesn't work. Because it's the kid that was born, he can't do Kedushin to her because to him, it always remains in Issacharus. And who's the author of the Mishnah, of this Brisa? The Rabbanan are the author of this Brisa, who have the strictest sense of what called Eishes Acha Shelo B'Lamai. Any brother that was born, no matter what, is always usher to that lady. Itmar. Let's do this new Gemara and then we'll stop. Itmar, we learned. Someone, he married the Yavama, what you're supposed to do. But one of the brothers then again goes ahead and has relations with the former co-wife. So what did he do wrong? So pligi barav achav ravina chad ama bekaris. He did an issakaris. Chad ama baaseh. He's even issaseh. And this is similar to the machlekes. When a person dies, does the eishes ach fall off his wife? Manda ama bekaris. One that says kares kirish lakish. He holds that it's like Rish Lakish, who holds that the eishes ach still remains with the co-wife. It's only with the wife that had Yevama that, of course, is permitted, but the rest of the co-wife, still remains as with the kares. Manda ba be'aseh Rabbi Yochanan. The one that says you only get an aseh is Rabbi Yochanan, and because it says bias echad yivne, since and it's a lav haba b'chlal aseh, you should build one. But the thing is that as soon as a person dies, all the eishes ach, the Isser Eishes Ach Bekaris, falls off. And therefore, according to Rabbi Yochanan, if the second brother or whoever, then one of the brothers had, the second brother had relations with the co-wife, he only was over in Isser Aseh, not in Isser Karis. New Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav, Sarah Soita, you have a woman that was Mizana Tachas Balav. So she's usher to her husband. If we know for a fact she did znuz, then she's usher to her husband. Then all of a sudden, she dies. Her husband dies. And really, her husband was not allowed to be with her anymore because she was mizana with Aden. So therefore, since Sarah Soita Asura, the co-wife is also, nobody falls to Yibam over here. Since the Saita, the woman that did Znus, would not fall to Yibam because she was Asr on her husband, the co-wife is also Asr on the brothers to do Yibam because Tuma Ksibe Ka'arayas. This is like Tuma, it says it in like the others. And the Torah says when a woman is Mizana Tachas Balav, she becomes Tameh. So she has a din like all the other Arayas. Masiv Rav Chizda. Masiv Rav Chizda. So the Brisa says Rab Shimon Omer Biyasei Chilitzasim Achav Shalrishim Petar Saras. So what we're talking about over here is like this: you have a woman that they told her that we think your husband died. Okay, so she went ahead and was married to somebody else. And then her first husband shows up. So now, and then the case continues on that the brother of the second person she was supposedly married to, and the brother of the first one she was supposedly married to, both die. So now she technically falls to Chalitza and Yibam, to two different families. So the Tanakama holds she gets a Chalitza from both families. Reb Shimon says, no, we just ignore the second family because the whole reason why she would marry the second family was a whole mistake. And therefore she could do Bia, she could do Yibam or Chalitza with the brother of the original family that she was married to. Right? So now So we see from there that really she's like a saita. She actually did znus. She was really married to the first one. She did znus with somebody else, and yet she falls to yibum. And you told me that this woman, according to your opinion, you told me that a woman that's mizana tachas her husband, not only she doesn't fall to yibum, but her co-wife would not fall to yibum. And here we see that the opinion of Rab Shimon is that she actually falls to yibum, and she was mizana by accident, and she does fall to yibum, and she could be misyabim to the brothers of the first family. And not only that, even the Rabbanim would agree to Rab Shimon that that the tzara you'd be able to do yibum with the tzara. So already you can see that this question doesn't take base. Because when does a woman become asa to her husband if she's mizana tachtav? Is only if she did it on purpose. Here she did it by mistake. They told her that your husband died, so she went ahead and married somebody else. Amalach, he will tell you, Amalach Rav will tell you, you're telling me, I tell you, a soita daraisa is like an erva, and you can't do yibam or chalitza. You don't need to do yibam or chalitza with her. And you bring me a case of a soita darabanim, someone by accident was mizana with two people. So the Gemara says, "Do correlate, might correlate." The one that asked the question, what was he thinking? He says, "Kasava called the tikkun rabbanon came the raisa tikkun." When the rabbanon made somebody a soita rabbanon, I would think it's like a halacha daraisa. And since in that scenario, she should only be getting, she should not even get anything. She cannot do yibum. Maybe you would have to do chalitza. So the one that asked the question, in this scenario, if you hold kol the tikkun rabbanon kain deraisa tikkun, they should have said that the tzara you're not allowed to do yibum with the co-wife and should require her at least chalitza. So the answer is here. It's anyway. The whole thing was by accident. And therefore, according to this, you technically could do yibum not only with her, but also with the tzara. Masav Ravashi asked a question. Nichnasa imoy l'seisa v'shasi mekadei tuma asur lebeisa v'asur lechel truma. Person went in with this lady privately and stayed the time it takes to do bia. So we don't know if they did bia. She's a soita misafik. Asur lebeisa, she can't go back to her husband. Asur lechel truma, she can't eat truma. She dies, she gets chalitza and doesn't get yibum. So you see that you get chalitza, not yibum, and here she can't be with her husband, and yet you're still requiring her chalitza, not yibum, but you're still requiring her chalitza. You don't say she goes scot-free. Amalach Rav will tell you, Amalach Rav, aminulach ano soita vade. I'm talking about a soita for sure. You're bringing me cases of a soita suffix. Why is a soita different? Tuma. So the Gemara says, why is a soita vadai like an erva? Because the Torah uses the word tuma. Soita suffix nami tuma ksiva. A soita who is a suffix, you don't know if she did znus. The Torah also uses the word tuma with her, and therefore she should also be potter from talitza and yibum. Why is it, if you know for sure that the person did znus, she's potter from talitza and yibum, because the Torah said the word tuma, soita suffix, the Torah also uses the word tuma. Now, how do you know that the Torah uses the word tuma? So let's go a little further. The Tanya we learned to the Brayser, Yosef ben Kefar, if someone goes back and remarries the person he divorced after she married somebody else, asura, he did an iser. He did an iser. All right, asura. She's permitted. She's not permitted to go back to the first one. But mina erisin, if she only had erisin with the second person, mitaris, then she's mutter to go back to the first husband. After she had relations. So only if she was married to the second guy, then she can't go back to the first husband. But if she's not married to the second guy, she only had erisin to the second person, So then, if they get a divorce, she could go marry the first husband. So says Rabbi Yossi ben Kepa. No matter what she does with the second husband, even if she only did erisin with the second husband, she can never remarry the first husband. So what does it mean? What does it mean? Achrei hutama. The rabbis, this comes to include soite shenistera. Soite shenistera. So a soite that's nistera, that means that she was even a suffix. And we see that even though she's a suffix, even though she's a suffix, you see that she's also to go back to her new husband. That's what it means. If she's a soitish and nistera, she just we don't know if she did znus. She can never go back to her first husband until you resolve that. But you see that the pasuk uses utama, and it means a soita that there was only besafik. My nistera, so the Gemara says, no, nistera doesn't mean that you don't know she did znus. Nivala. My karela nivala, why she nistera? Why she called nistra? Lishna ma'al yanaket. The Bryce is using a nice language, but what it does mean is that a woman that did znus on purpose, she can never go back to her husband again. So the Gemara says, nimula tuma behedik sibe. If that pasuk tells you, is discussing a woman that did bia on purpose, that she can't go back to her husband, I know that already. The Torah tells you that when she becomes tamei, and we know for a fact she did znus, she can't go back to her husband. So that the answer is the Gemara, lamekim Allah b'lav. That is a lav. So the Torah adds another lav that you can't marry her again. From this pasuk, you know that when she did for sure znus, there's only Isser Asay to marry her again, to take her back. Now we know there's an Isser lav. Once she did znus, she's usher to her husband with a lav. And finally, the Gemara answers. The Gemara says, Rabbi Yossi ben Kefa, he doesn't hold a soita. You know for sure that she did znus. You get a lav for that. Afil is a night name my time up. Even if she did znus, why for sure? Why is the problem? Why can't you take her back? Is not an isser, because Havaya v'ishas ksiba. The Torah says that she has to marry the second husband, and marry the second husband. Then the one that gave her divorce can't take her back. She had to have kedushin or marriage, but she has kedushin and marriage. But just stam znus, Rabbi Yossi ben Kefa, for a husband to take her back, it would only be an isser asay. Okay, we will stop here.